I set up in the corner of the abandoned warehouse, the only shelter I could find with weak walls and broken windows. My shortwave radio crackled to life, but the signals were a mess, static drowning out words, panicked voices overlapping, fragments of emergency broadcasts, and distress calls. I twisted the dial, trying channel after channel, hoping for a clear voice, a trace of my wife or daughter. The radio spat out a broken message, something about an evacuation near my old suburb, enforced by militia patrols. No names, no details, just a cold warning. The clutter of misinformation was suffocating, but I couldn't let myself stop. Each distorted broadcast was a thread to follow, a sliver of hope. I knew the risk. Lingering here might expose me, but the desperate need to find them outweighed the danger. I resolved to keep scanning, to piece together any clue that might lead me to them, even if it meant sitting in this hollow shell of a building, surrounded by silence and threat. I settled deeper into the dim corner of the warehouse, the scattered supplies offering little comfort. I tuned through chaotic broadcasts, hunting for any mention of family reunions or safe zones. Each transmission was a blur of frantic voices, rumors, and desperate code words, none of them reliable. I scribbled down every location and phrase I caught, a mental map of hope and uncertainty. One signal stood out, a group moving toward the northern suburbs. It wasn't a promise, just a lead, but it gave me a direction. The warehouse's silence pressed in, but I chose to stay alert, knowing that every minute wasted was a minute lost in the search. My decision was clear: compile what I could and prepare to move toward that northern angle. The risk was not just that the information was incomplete. It was that acting on it might lead me directly into danger. But standing still wasn't an option anymore. I had to trust the fragments, even if it meant stepping deeper into the unknown. The sudden crack of gunfire shattered the fragile silence around the warehouse. I had been clinging to the radio, desperate for any news of my family, when the militia's patrols swept in closer than I expected. Staying meant certain capture, so I grabbed what little gear I'd managed to assemble, my tools, a few jerry cans, and bolted for the back exit. Every second counted as I slipped into the narrow alley, heart pounding with the fear of being spotted. Losing the radio was a brutal setback. It had been my only lifeline to the outside world. But survival meant moving, not waiting. Now I had to navigate blind, with the militia hunting anyone caught transmitting signals. The risk was clear. Without the radio, I was isolated, forced to rely on instinct and whatever scraps of information I could glean on the ground. This was no longer just about finding my family. It was about staying alive long enough to do it. I needed to find a way out before the militia caught up, but the main roads were no longer safe. Police had abandoned their checkpoints, leaving highways dotted with burning wrecks and armed gangs controlling the intersections. I made the call to abandon my usual route and slip through the back streets, hoping to avoid direct confrontation. The narrow alleys were littered with debris, and the distant sounds of looting and fires echoed through the ruined cityscape. From a fractured vantage point, I spotted desperate figures arguing over salvage and a group setting fire to a storefront. No path felt secure, but staying on the main roads would be too risky. The detour bought me distance, but exposed me to new hazards, unseen eyes and hostile survivors lurking in shadows. I had to move fast and keep my head low. Then I caught sight of the highway ahead, completely blocked by burning vehicles and armed gangs. The city had fallen to chaos, and every decision now carried the weight of survival or demise. I had to make it to my truck, or I wouldn't make it out at all. My truck was still where I left it. I had it hidden in an abandoned warehouse, which luckily has remained undiscovered. I drove through the maze of side streets, desperate to reach the city's edge before militia patrols tightened their noose. Suddenly, a surge of panicked people flooded the road ahead, their faces twisted with fear and rage. Vehicles were being attacked for fuel and supplies, and this crowd was no exception. I slammed the brakes and quickly realized there was no way through. The decision was clear, but costly. I reversed sharply into a narrow alley, jarring the truck and snapping the side mirror. It wasn't just damage. The broken mirror meant less awareness in a city where every second counted. But the alternative was getting swallowed by the mob. This detour bought me time, but the risks had multiplied. The crowd's desperation had turned violent, and every vehicle was a target now. I had to move fast and keep my senses sharp. Losing the mirror was a small price for survival, but it made me more vulnerable. Ahead, the alley opened onto a quieter street. I knew the city's chaos was far from over. Escaping it was only the first battle. I managed to navigate my way to a parking lot near the northern outskirts of the city. There were a number of empty vehicles scattered throughout. I couldn't afford hesitation. The diesel in my jerry cans was running dangerously low. As I crouched by the tank, fitting the siphon tube, a shadow detached itself from behind a wrecked car. A man, ragged and desperate, wielded a crowbar and demanded fuel with a voice roughened by exhaustion and fear. I weighed my options quickly. I was unarmed, but bluffing was my only chance. I feigned reaching for a weapon and kept my grip firm on the tube, hoping he wouldn't call my bluff. The seconds stretched thin as he stepped closer, crowbar raised. Then, with a surge of adrenaline, I yanked the tube free and sprinted toward my truck, clutching the precious diesel. I left behind tools and gear I'd scavenged, but the fuel was worth the loss. This confrontation was a stark reminder. In this new world, every resource is a battleground, and trust is a currency too expensive to spend lightly. I found a small, abandoned park on the outskirts, a rare pocket of silence amid the chaos. My body ached, so I sat down against a cracked bench and pulled out a worn photo of my wife and daughter. It was the only thing I had left to remind me of better times. I whispered our family's safe word, the one we used in emergencies, hoping it might anchor me. But the distant sounds of shouting and gunfire shattered the fragile calm. I forced myself to pack away the keepsakes, knowing the past couldn't save me here. The violence creeping closer reminded me that survival demanded focus, not nostalgia. Yet that pain sharpened my resolve. I had to keep moving, keep searching, because giving up on them would mean losing the last part of myself worth fighting for. I heard the chaos before I saw it, shouting and the sharp clang of something heavy hitting metal. Moving closer, I spotted a mob gathered around a collapsed pharmacy, desperate fists pounding a barricaded door. Inside, through a cracked window, I caught sight of a woman bleeding and clearly trapped. The mob was volatile, and any sudden move could turn them on me. I had to act fast. I decided to set off a car alarm a few streets over, hoping the noise would scatter some of the attackers and thin their numbers. It was a risk, drawing attention to myself, but staying hidden meant letting her die. As the alarm blared, I saw a few people break off, confused and angry. That gave me the opening I needed to get closer and truly see her. Claire, a nurse, terrified and wounded. Saving her wasn't just about one life. It was about forging an alliance that might keep us both alive in the days ahead. I edged closer, heart pounding, eyes fixed on the broken pharmacy window where Claire lay trapped and bleeding. The mob's anger was a constant threat, but hesitation wasn't an option. I reached through the jagged glass, gripping her arm to pull her out. Suddenly, a desperate looter grabbed her leg, trying to drag her back into the chaos. I had to act fast. Reaching for the tire iron at my side, I swung with everything I had. The metal connected with a sickening thud, forcing the attacker to release her. Risking injury myself, I fought off the struggle, my hands scraping against glass and concrete. Claire was free, but cut badly. Her blood was a stark reminder that this wasn't just a rescue, it was a gamble with death. She whispered that she was a nurse, separated from her group, and now more alone than ever. We had no time to dwell on that. The mob was regrouping, and if we stayed, we'd be overwhelmed. We had to move, together or die apart. The mob was regrouping faster than I anticipated, their shouts growing louder and more frenzied. Claire's injuries slowed our pace. Every step she took was a painful reminder that we couldn't afford to linger. When the fire erupted inside the pharmacy, the smoke and flames forced my hand. Carrying Claire was the only option. Abandoning some of my supplies was a bitter but necessary trade. I hoisted her into my arms, feeling the weight of both her body and our dwindling chances. The flames licked closer as we sprinted towards the truck, the crowd's chaos fueling my urgency. Losing my medical bag stings more than I want to admit, but survival demands these compromises. As we reached the truck, Claire whispered about a militia group marking buildings nearby. A new threat we can't ignore. This escape was barely a reprieve. It's clear we're running from more than just the mob now. We've survived the fire, but the real fight is just beginning. The militia checkpoint was an iron gate across our only route, their rough voices and flashlights cutting through the night. They were stopping every vehicle, searching for fuel and weapons, anything to strengthen their hold. I had no choice but to turn off the main road, steering the truck toward the nearby golf course, a reckless gamble. The terrain was unforgiving. Debris hidden in the grass punctured the tires almost immediately. Claire's pain was a constant reminder that time was against us. Our escape hinged on this detour, but the damaged tires meant we were vulnerable to being stranded. Worse, I caught Claire whispering into her cell, a shaky signal revealing the militia's terrifying focus. They were hunting medical personnel. It explained their brutality, and suddenly our fragile alliance felt even more precarious. Every decision now carried heavier risks. We had to move fast, but the truck limped forward, a wounded beast on hostile ground. The night was far from over, and surviving this meant embracing uncertainty and relying on each other more than ever. Claire's breathing was shallow but steady as I handed her the last vial of antiseptic I had. My hands trembled slightly. Using it meant risking infection for myself later, but I had to trust her. She moved with a calm precision that told me she'd been here before, far beyond basic first aid. The ragged edges of her torn sleeve revealed the wound, and I watched as she improvised a dressing with strips torn from my shirt and some clean gauze. Every movement was careful, deliberate. No wasted energy, no risk of contamination. I kept my eyes on the darkening street outside, still tense, still wary. But as the wound stopped bleeding and Claire gave me a nod of thanks, I realized this wasn't just about survival supplies. It was about forming a fragile alliance. My instincts screamed caution, but the truth was clear. Alone, I wouldn't last. She had skills, and more than that, a steady head under pressure. If we were going to make it through this, I needed to start trusting her, despite the risks. For now, That meant sharing more than just supplies. It meant sharing responsibility. Claire and I came across a family stranded at a deserted highway rest stop, their faces etched with fear and exhaustion. They begged for water and directions, but I could see armed looters lurking down the road, eyes locked on any sign of vulnerability. The risk was immediate. Helping them could draw deadly attention, yet leaving them felt like abandoning hope. I chose to give them a small ration of water and pointed toward a safer route, refusing to take them with us. The decision weighs heavily. Every act of mercy here risks everything we fought to keep. As we moved on, the family's desperate pleas haunted me. A stark reminder that survival in this fractured world demands impossible choices, and that trust can be a fatal liability. After offering the family what little water and encouragement I could, Claire and I started back toward the truck, hoping to vanish before the looters noticed. But the crunch of gravel under tires told me they'd spotted us. A stolen sedan roared down the dirt track, headlights cutting through the dusk. I had only seconds to decide: lose them on the open road or risk the rough, overgrown path beside it. Choosing the dirt track was a gamble. The truck's suspension was fragile, and every bump threatened to break down. The looters swerved behind us, their shouts carrying on the wind. Pushing the truck harder, I felt the chassis groan beneath us. The risk was clear. If the truck failed, we'd be sitting ducks. But staying on the main road guaranteed capture. When we finally left the looters behind, the truck emitted a grinding noise, a grim reminder that escape wasn't free. Now we're marked. Word travels fast among the desperate. The looters know we're moving, and they'll be waiting. I settled into the truck's cab, the engine cold, but the radio alive with static and fragments of voices. My hands fumbled over the dials, scanning frequencies for anything recognizable. Most of the chatter was hostile: militia broadcasts, coded threats, and warnings of a new power rising named Jonah Voss. Then, faint and broken, a coded message slipped through, words I recognized, the safe word my family used long ago. It was barely audible, masked by interference and hostile chatter, but it was enough. I recorded it, knowing this might be the only lead to finding them in this chaos. The risk was clear. Lingering on this frequency could expose my position if intercepted. But the chance to reconnect, even remotely, outweighed the danger. This signal wasn't just noise, it was a lifeline. Now, with a grim sense of urgency, I knew I had to follow this thread, even if it meant stepping deeper into the shadows of this fractured world. Claire and I found a clearing deep in the woods, a rare moment of quiet away from the city's chaos. We needed to decide quickly. Alone we were vulnerable. Together we might stand a chance. Trust didn't come easy. She'd been betrayed before, and so had I. We both carried wounds deeper than the physical: loss, fear, suspicion. I laid out what I could offer: my knowledge of basic medical aid and some fuel reserves. Claire, in turn, revealed she had a contact north of the city, a safe spot, maybe our best option for shelter. The risk was clear. Sticking together meant sharing scarce resources and exposing ourselves to new dangers. But the alternative, going solo, was almost certain death. We agreed to a pact, setting ground rules to watch each other's backs. No surprises. It was a fragile alliance, born out of necessity, but it might just be what keeps us alive. The night was closing in fast. Our next move was north, towards that contact, hoping for a foothold beyond the ruins. Night has fallen hard, and Claire's breathing is steady inside the truck, but the distant gunfire and the eerie glow of fires on the horizon remind me this city is far from safe. I'm caught between exhaustion and vigilance. The decision was clear. Set the perimeter alarm with the tools I have, keep the shortwave radio close, and forego sleep. Every crackle on the radio could be a threat or a sign of life. The collapse is accelerating, shadows growing longer with every passing hour. I keep scanning the darkness, knowing that rest could mean death. My hope for finding my family fuels this stubborn watchfulness, but the cost is high. The city burns beyond this field, but I'm here, holding the line for Claire and myself. Dawn will come, and with it, I'll face whatever chaos awaits with whatever strength I have left. At first light, Claire and I packed what little we had left in the truck. The night's uneasy silence shattered when a ragged group of refugees appeared on the horizon, their faces hollow, hands raised in plea. Desperation hung thick in the air. I recognized the same hunger and fear I'd seen in the city's chaos, but stopping meant exposing ourselves to unknown risks, potentially hostile strangers, or worse, drawing attention from roaming scavengers. My mind raced. Help them and risk everything, or push on to find my family and keep Claire safe. I chose survival, the cruel calculus that had become second nature. As I started the engine, I glanced back. The refugees did not follow, but the reminder was clear. We are not alone in this fractured world. Others are out there, fighting their own battles, just like us. This journey will test more than my endurance. It will test my resolve to hold on to hope and humanity. We drove on, the rising sun a cold beacon for what lay ahead.